What's going on, peeps? Welcome to the Sales Top to Bottom. I am your host, Keenan, where we talk about all things sales. I'm with my lovely co-host, Becc. Becc, let me ask you a question. Is it appropriate for your parents to call you friends?
Define friend.
You have a friend and your parent calls them without telling you.
It depends on the reason of why. In this hypothetical instance, what would be the instance of why they texted the person?
To hang out.
To hang out? No. Keenan is implying right now for everyone watching who, I'm not about to be gaslit. Keenan is implying that my dad texted him to hang out.
Imply? How am I implying? It's explicit. Your dad called me and said, I quote, "Hey, Keenan, I'm flying from Alaska home. I'm stopping in Denver. Would you like to get a drink or hang out?"
Oh my goodness. Keenan has reached a new level.
Go Roger. Go Roger.
Okay, now I know that it's true because he is coming home from Alaska. And so what'd you say? Are y'all like hanging out?
I said, hey, I'd love to, but I don't think Becc told you I live in Vail now, which is 2 hours away. And he said I have to do my show with your lovely daughter at noon, so I don't think I have time.
Okay, I'm so rattled because I definitely thought this was a myth that Keenan was like speaking of mythology.
We're not in that segment yet.
But he is coming home from Alaska, so now I'm like,
why would I make that shit up? People don't understand, man. People love Jimmy.
All right, and with that, we are on to the first segment of this podcast, which is Email Teardown. This is the segment where Keenan and Becc tear down emails and messages that were sent over to them. Now, on to the first email. This one, the subject line is #1 MasterCard provider for B2B. Keenan, happy Friday. Looking to connect to help you understand how we are different in the corporate card and B2B space. We offer way more than just another corporate card, in parentheses, #1 fuel card provider, as well as our own T&E set of products. #1 provider in the B2B space for MasterCard, have helped many companies, large and small, consider ways to increase a return by monetizing their A/P dollar signs. Sorry, I'm not very knowledgeable in that. Secure their payments by shifting away from check/ACH, both riddled with fraud. Streamline the A&P process versus endless hiring and training of staff. Decrease errors within payables. Please let me know when a good time would be to connect. I look forward to hearing from you. Regards, A. So, Keenan.
I sent this to you because I had no idea what the frick they were talking about. This is probably the most product-centric email I have ever gotten in my life. I have no idea why I would ever want to change a corporate card. So we use Amex here, okay? So we have Amex, and everybody in the company has their own little Amex card. I just chose Amex. I don't know why I chose it. I don't know why. Probably because I had it in the past. I don't know if it's good for me. I don't know if it's bad for me. I don't know what I should be looking for and not looking for. So to send this out, I got glossed. I got completely glossed over. As a matter of fact, this email was so bad, I sent it to one of my sales reps and said, you should call this company because they need help, right? So everything about this is wrong. It's product-centric. It doesn't help the buyer understand why they would need to change at all. It expects or assumes the buyer understands what all this stuff is and why it matters. It's probably sent to the wrong person because being the CEO, technically speaking of anything, they probably should have sent this to my controller or somebody like that who's in this day today. So there was everything about this email was wrong. Not a redeeming piece.
Becc, what about you? What do you think about this email?
I mean, honestly, I'm still a little bit rattled from the intro. My head's kind of spinning. But
that's what I do best. Rattle away.
And I don't get rattled. Point being.
Good point, Dan Panico. Good point. Go.
What was the point?
Already talking about themselves. Too much. RIP.
So here's the thing. People get really excited to talk about their product. There's a number of different studies that basically show that if you were involved in the creation of something, you're going to overvalue it at 20x what someone who didn't create that thing. So my push to people is if you're excited, you're like, I really want to get in front of this person and I really want to talk to this person, or I really want to tell them X, and X has nothing to do with them, meaning it's not like, oh, they're running into this problem, they don't know about it, and I really want to get in front of them and tell them about it. If it has anything to do with you, you're excited about the wrong thing. You're excited about your product, but you're not excited about any problem that they would want to solve with it. So I'm like, this first line gives away the whole bag to me. Looking to connect, to help you understand how we're different in the corporate, card, and B2B space. I'm like, I have never seen a more confusing statement in my life. Different than what? Different than corporate, different than B2B, different than, I'm like, just start with them. It needs to be focused on them. If there wasn't a reason for your outreach that's a trigger about them, then you have to start over. Don't send the email. Can y'all hear that little kid screaming in the background?
A little bit.
Beck's had a baby in the last 2 weeks.
I have. I look great.
Yeah, you do, Beck.
Let me go on. Actually, I don't think we have enough time for the next email.
So what did he say?
Why don't we do this? Why don't we say I'll tell you what they could have done to make the email better. They could have, in that list, they said, I'd love to talk to you, see if you are spending too much or wasting dollars or don't have a card that fits your financial situation. If your card or using your current card you experience, and flip all that into negatives, right? Poor time in accounting, lost revenue, long AR. I don't know. I can't even read it from here. But anyways, you lay out all the negativities and then turn it. So if you're experiencing any of this, I'd love 15, 20 minutes to talk about how we could get that money back or how we could stop the bleeding or whatever the issue or problem of it. At least orient me around a problem. Oh, that was fast.
Keenan got dinged. That's what she said.
Well, with that, we are on to the next segment of this podcast, which is
Sales Mythology.
This is the segment where Keenan and Becc demystify common myths within the sales industry. And the first myth of today is training at SKOs will really equip my sellers or SDRs to hit their targets. Becc, why don't you start us off on this one?
Well, I'll start us off with a stat. You can only learn 30 minutes of new information statistically in a day. So if you want to teach someone anything, even how to be a better seller, scale of 1 to 10, they're objectively diagnosing on a 3. If you want to get them to a 4 or a 5 or a 6, you only have 30 minutes of new information. So SKOs can make people feel better, like, oh, I'm equipping my reps. But if you don't have implementation, if you don't have like the before, the after picture, the execution, how am I going to hold my reps accountable to kind of gap and notice point? How am I going to streamline this into the CRM? How am I going to make sure that they're actually acquiring this information? How am I going to make sure when they aren't that I can get them to the next level? If you don't have any of that, then you might have a couple of ideas and a lot of excitement, but no actual real progress. So I kind of relate it to, this is probably going to piss some people off, but I'm with Keenan, so it's like I get a pass. I'm like, fire the bullets at Keenan. It kind of reminds me of like people in the church parking lot, like they go to church once a week, you know, so they can justify in their head they're a good person, but then they're like running people off the road, you know, and giving people the finger and being a punk the rest of the week. So I wouldn't let it be an excuse that you think in your head that you did your due diligence as a leader to get my reps to the next level. If I just invested in a one-day SKO, it's going to come down to the execution and do I hold my reps accountable to it?
What about you, Keenan? What do you think?
So ask the question exactly how you asked it of Becc again, please.
So training at SKOs will really equip my sellers or SDRs to hit their targets.
Okay. So now the answer is unequivocally flat. And I'll go a step further. And I would almost say, unless the SKO is training, it's not even training in an SKO.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get someone in a room for 2 or 3 hours and someone talks to them or runs them through something, that's not training, right? I mean, unless it's a very targeted training, like how to address objections. Okay, like I could see a 2-hour session on how to address objections, whether I agree with it or not is the point. But I can see how that training might land some new knowledge and some behaviors. But generally speaking, when it comes to sales training, it's more than a 2-hour session. It's not some speaker coming in talking about something. Because let's keep it real. Most of the quote unquote training in SKO never lasts more than 2 hours. So there is no role play involved. There are no workshops involved. There's very rarely a curriculum that walks them through in a set order. There's no expectations of what the outcomes or what the learning module is supposed to accomplish and how it's supposed to land. Like there's actual science and methods to properly training somebody. So the answer is, a better way of putting it, SKO is not your training time. It can be your education time. It could be your awareness time. It could be your group setting time, but it is not training. And I have this conversation far too many times with organizations that they think the SKO is their training time. So no, it cannot. And it certainly will not last, right? It will certainly not last. They may come out pumped up and excited. Woo, yeah, let's go. And I saw a funny meme the other day, and I can't remember what the first part of it is. I'm making meme. Oh, it showed it was a great meme. It showed the first 5 minutes after a sales training, right? And it showed the guy from 300, you know, the movie 300. Like, oh! And then it goes 5 minutes later, and it shows the cat sitting like this with a Bud Light next to him.
Totally.
Yeah. No, it can't. It can't. It will not. So don't even try to combine the two.
All right. This next sales myth is coming straight back to you, Keenan. This one is 20% of deals end up turning into closed won.
I feel like this is a trick question because the data shows, I guess it comes down really what is being asked here, because is this a trick question on the definition of closed won? Because the data shows that the average win rate is 20%. Now, a lot of that is order taking. A lot of that is customers making decisions themselves. A lot of that is the salespeople getting lucky, and then salespeople selling themselves. So I'm not sure what the myth is, but the data suggests that it's about 20%, depending on the size of the deal. Bigger deals are lower. I think bigger deals are down to 15% now. Small deals are pushing 23, 24%, but I think in the main it's 20%. So yeah, I should have asked for clarity on the question. But from what I see, that's about right. Yes. So what's the trick question, Becc?
So it's not a trick question. So what I see orgs diagnosing incorrectly a lot of the time is the average conversion for an inbound lead, meaning someone coming to you saying, I want to evaluate your product, is 35%. But then from an outbound perspective, when you go out and hunt someone outbound, it's 6%. And so they falsely hybrid and they're like, my average close won rate is 20%. So I'll see a lot of orgs go into it and they're like, hey, so I actually have a really high conversion. They're like, my conversion is 30% or 32%. And then I'll go into the pipeline details. I'm like, right, but it was all demo request, right? So someone who's coming from the inbound line has self-diagnosed that they have a problem that's big enough, a pain that's egregious enough in the present, or an impact that's big enough in the future to where they think that they should do something about it. Whereas outbound, you usually don't have that. They might poke around the tires, but they have self-selected that at this point, they might have a pain, they might have, this negative experience or something that they're scared of that they might want to get ahead of. But at that point in time, they don't have a problem that's big enough to solve for it. Otherwise, they would have come inbound. So I think kind of the damage of that myth is not understanding those two perspectives. If I'm looking at my close won and I see it all the time, that people are like, oh, I'm really, really high, or I'm really, really low. And when I dig into the pipeline numbers, I'm like, okay, if this is all coming inbound and you're sitting at 30%, you're actually a little under average. If I'm going all outbound, for instance, I have no brand recognition, no demo request, blah, 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 and I'm at 15%. And I'm like, why am I doing so crappily? I'm like, you're actually above industry average. So I think it can give people a false kind of metric. It's kind of like the statistic people say all the time, 50% of couples end up in divorce. And I'm like, that's just simply statistically not true. But it's a myth that people believe across the board. So I think
Why
20%.
is it statistically not true? 50%, 20% is the close rate.
I'm sorry, say it again.
20% is the win rate. Now,
Right.
how it breaks down,
It's
so that's
the win rate,
statistically accurate.
It's technically accurate, but it's misleading on where someone's at. Because someone could say like, hey, I'm closing 30%, so I'm actually really good. And I'm like, well, it's dependent. Are they all coming from inbound? And I'm like, you're actually a little below average.
Yeah,
so it's just a universally term that people accept. When I cannot think of a program that I have dead on heard of them converting 20%. So it's just one of those numbers that people believe in. So I challenge people to look into the source of the deal to do a more accurate analysis on like, how am I doing from a close one perspective for the outcome? Okay. It wasn't a trick question, but what were you going to say, Keenan?
What I'd like to see is I'd like to see people add to the conversion rate based on inbound and outbound, but add to it and start being able to measure conversion rate, not on stage. A lot of people do it on stage. What's your win rate on stage? Which I think is a shit show, right? But I'd actually like to see it based on the assessment of the problem, impact, root cause. Now, if you could start going out and saying, okay, when we find problems that are bigger than this or focused on this, our close rate is 90%. When we don't find those problems and we only find these problems, our close rate is this. And when we find these problems of this size, they're only this. If you can actually start assessing the close or win rate based on the qualitative data of that customer, now you're on to something. I do this all the time. I say, two people come to you for water. Traditional salesperson's like, oh, I'm super thirsty. I haven't had a drink in half a day. I really need water. And the other person says, oh yeah, I'm super thirsty too. It's been a long time since I've had water. I really need it. I love you guys. They're all saying the same thing. And the salesperson's trying to sell them water the same way. But a really good salesperson comes in and finds out person A has been playing basketball all day, ran out of water at 12. It is now 4. It's been 4 hours. They're super thirsty, super dehydrated, but there's a 7-Eleven 3 miles away. The other one recognizes that the person's been in the desert for fucking 2 days. They're 100 miles away from water, and they're going to die in the next 3 or 4 hours. I don't have to ask what the win rate is anymore. The scenario told me the win rate. And sales teams can't do that. They literally can't use the buyer's current environment.
You probably didn't know. I have to add more ethically to your point. It is dependent on where your start point is. Conversion from what into closed one. Someone has a problem. Someone is a decision maker. It
always should be from the opportunity. The minute the opportunity is created, that's
right. But the minute the opportunity is created is subjective, because reps all the time create it on, do they have a need? Is there a timeline? Okay, I'm going to create it as an opportunity. So I'm like, there's actually, in my view, no static start point. So there's no data at all.
Fair enough. So if you start it super late, then you're going to have a false high one. And if you have a 20%, you start it late, you have a really shitty one.
Reps do it all the time. They're like, oh, it counts, because they don't want it to count if it's not going to close. So I'm like, I don't believe truly in my core that we have any data at all because of the subjectivity of the start point.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So with that, we are on to the next segment.
And you got to bring the horn back, by the way. You got to bring this.
I do. I was going to bring the horn back this week, but it's out of batteries. So I promise.
I'm surprised you want the horn this episode.
Yeah, I love that thing.
Well, hey, we're going on to our next segment of this podcast, which is
Take It or Leave It.
This is the segment where I introduce common sales tactics and Becc and Keenan tell us whether they would take it or leave it. So the first one of today is coming in with a hypothesis to a discovery call. Keenan, take it or leave it.
Take that shit all day long. Take that all day long. But let me be clear, my young friends. You use the hypothesis as a compass or a guide to uncover your question. Use your questions to uncover or validate it. You do not use it to tell. So I'll give you an example. The other day I was at a bar. Wow. And there was this dude sitting next to me. And I looked at him.
How'd it go?
Sorry?
How'd it go? Just joking.
Whatever. Anyways, this dude sitting next to me.
Did you close?
And
close ratio?
All right, I'm done. Go back.
No. Keep going with the story. Keep going.
Keep going.
Back to my story. Timing is everything.
I want the story. What? I'm not allowed to make the first time I make a joke. And
Timing is everything. Anyways, so I look him up and down, and I'm like, this dude golfed today. Becc, it's just not funny. That's the hard part. It's just not funny. It was funny. It'd be good. But she keeps doubling down on an unfunny
you looked
joke.
him up and down, and then what happened?
Yes. And then what happened? Yes. I simply asked him, how was your round of golf today? And yes, Becc, I don't know why this is funny. I don't know why it's funny. I think Beck's trying to imply that I'm gay, which doesn't bother me at all, right? Or that I'm checking out a dude, which still doesn't bother me. But I don't know. Look how red she is. She's dying. She is literally dying. We got to work. Look, Becc is a lot of things. Funny isn't one of them. So we got to work on that. We have to really, really work.
So then you looked him up and down, and you said,
Yes,
"Come here, often. How is your golf today?"
Said, oh, how did you hit them today? And he's like, how did you know I golfed? And there was so many things about him, but there was one very clear thing for me. He had a can of chew sitting in front of him. So I'm a killer profiler, right? So he had on shorts, he had on flip-flops, which means he wasn't wearing sneakers or something, which means he had moved out of shoes into those flip-flops and all this. But it was the can of chew in front of him that solidified it. So why am I telling you this dumb story? I had a hypothesis. I didn't make a statement. I asked a question.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer is I'm going to take it all day long as you use it to guide your questions, not make statements. Becc, you're up.
Hi, Becc. Take it or leave it.
Okay, I'm going to leave it. And the reason is hypothetically, if it is something to guide, then yes. But the very few reps who do develop a hypothesis, I never see them able to put it down. They're like, no, this must be what's going on. And then I don't think that most people possess the ability. It's actually a key marker of intelligence is how often can you pivot mid-argument to another side based on the newly available data, that it's not your ego at play, that you're like, oh, I didn't know this, and so now I know this, so I'm going to keep going. So usually the very few reps that I do think have a hypothesis, when they come into the call, they can't let go of it. Like they're just so proud of themselves and they just want to tell people. The hypothesis I think that you should have is that generally speaking, this buyer persona is usually measured on this thing. That's a hypothesis I do think you should draw, but generally speaking, I'm going to leave it.
She has no faith in salespeople. Hear that, people? Becc has no faith.
Uh-huh.
All right, with 1 minute to go, we have one last take it or leave it, and this one is breakup emails. Becc, take it or leave it.
I'm going to take it. Absolutely. Some of my highest converters and the more decision makers will come in near the end of the sequence. There's always a state of inflection point where it's smarter from a statistical view and a TAM view, an opportunity cost view, to move on to the next part. You can't just email them endlessly forever. However, 99.9% of them are done incorrectly. They're like, did you see my last voicemail? I sent you 15 emails and I haven't gotten a response. You either must not be the right person or not value your team or not value data. So usually how they're executed, leave it. But a breakup email in general, take it. I think you should be intentional about it. Oh, I'm sorry, Keenan.
No, you're not.
I am. I'm not sorry about most of the things I do to you, but that one I am.
That's okay.
All right. And with that, we are going to the next segment of this podcast, which is
The Inbox.
Much like why my dad called you, I'm never gonna know now.
I told you why.
I'm gonna ping my dad and tell him to stop flirting with you over text message.
I told you why. Dad just likes me better anyways. Oh,
hang out with you at a bar. Was my dad the guy at the bar?
I like your dad.
well, hey,
he called me nice. He goes, God, you're so nice. I'm like,
he does like you. He really likes you. I don't tell you that, but.
And then he said something you wouldn't want to hang out. I know what he said too. It was funny. He goes, He goes, I get it. Plus, you wouldn't want to hang out with an old dude like me. And I said, hey, sorry to burst your bubble, but I'm closer to your age than I am to your daughters. And he laughed because that's a good point.
Yikes.
That's a little scary, got to be honest.
I don't want to think about that.
Just saying, and that was far too often, I'd like to admit.
Personally, I don't want to think about that.
Well, hey, this is my favorite segment of the podcast.
The mailbox is back.
The
It's back in the
mailbox
US.
is back.
Good thing the mailbox didn't need batteries. Oh,
True, very true, very true. All I need is to flip it up and it's ready for action.
Oh my goodness.
Well, hey,
there's an echo.
there is an echo. I believe it's coming from
Is it me?
Becc. Yes, indeed, it is coming from Becc.
What can I do?
I would hold up. Let me just say the question, and then whenever we get to yours, I'll unmute you.
Okay.
Well, this is the segment where Becc and Keenan answer questions from our audience. And for that, we have the help of this trusty mailbox. And the first question of today is from Jeremy Levant from France.
From Francais.
Yes, indeed. He asks, I believe one of the best assets a salesperson can have is business acumen. But how do you develop it fast without having to take years and years learning it on the job? Is an MBA worth it, or is it simply enough to do online research on your buyers? Becc, we're going to you first. What do you think about this? Oh.
Okay, now I'm off mute. Is my echo better?
Your echo is way better.
Okay, I turned down the volume. I figured it out. Figured out the root cause. I think business acumen is very important. I don't think you need an MBA to get it. I actually think an MBA is for a completely different subset. I'd quickly Google your buyer's metrics, problems that they commonly have, root causes of those problems, all of the root causes, industry statistics, and do that for all of your buyers. Pick a new buyer every single week. And after 2 months, you'll know an unbelievable amount more than you did. And then stage 2 of that is I would start attending webinars that they attend. And I would start going to networking events, hang out where they hang out. If you want to speak French better, then hang out with French people, move to France, do whatever you have to do. But I would subsume myself in their world. I don't think an MBA, even if you did go through that, would get you that, certainly for your buyer in specific. So that's where I would start. And it's, free too.
Hi, Keenan, what about you? What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think I like what Becc said. Immerse yourself, I think is what I want to use. Immerse yourself in their world. Spend as much time as you can talking to your product people, right? Ask them why they built a particular product, what problems they thought they were solving. Try to understand who their customers are. So I think getting as much data in raw format is critical. The other piece, I don't really know, and this might upset some people. But my experience has shown there's 2 types of business acumen. One is your basic knowledge or understanding of the actual information. Like, what is a balance sheet? I don't know. Like what is AR? How is AR affected? What is an onboarding plan? How would you develop one? Why are they important? Who do they affect? Like, all of that is data, right? Like, that someone can spew the data. But beyond that is how all of that connects, right? How all of that negatively impact, positively impact, it's all the filler stuff or the mortar to those bricks that requires critical thinking skills. And I don't know how to teach critical thinking skills.
Oh, we have 3 seconds to go, but
Example.
Right. So that I think what Becc said is great, but I think in addition, really, I should look this up to see if there's something that exists, but really start to ask yourself, how well do you connect dots? How curious are you? And how well can you follow logical patterns? That's the key piece, in my opinion.
I was going to give a small example for people. When I first moved here, one of the amen, by the way, to everything you were saying, and I think it takes an intentional effort to like force yourself there. When I moved here, there's a number of different things that are new to me. One of them is military time. So I changed my phone to military time.
Hey, it's 8:32.
And right, yeah. Well, not all of us are brilliant like you. And like in the beginning, it sucked because I'm like, what does it mean 23? Or 23 is easy, but like 21, blah, blah. But now I'm used to it. So it's like, do that within your buyer's world. How do you, I don't want to know.
How do you what?
Keenan just knows random facts. Like
What's
that's
curiosity?
I know that's why that bar instance like cracks me up because I'm like, of course, he's like wondering what the guy next to him did, you know, what you just know. I just swear you just Google random facts.
It's really curiosity. And I'll tell you a quick story. And I can't even speak to this drive's business acumen, but I believe curiosity is absolutely critical. So back in my first job, I dated this girl from New Orleans. Great girl. I won't say her name. She'd never see this, but I want to be respectful. Great girl. Really liked her. We dated for a little over a year. She was from Nolens, right? And Nolens, right? And somehow, what's it called? What's that damn? Oh, Mardi Gras came up, right? And of course, she grew up there, so she went to it all the time, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, it hit me. I'm like, literally, this is how my mind worked. Geez, why is New Orleans really the only place in America that celebrates this thing called Mardi Gras? Gee, I wonder what Mardi Gras is. So I said to her, what is Mardi Gras? And she said, that's a great question. I don't know.
Then you Google it.
No, this is before Google. This struck me.
Wow.
And this is why I'm telling the story. This is, I think, most people. And by the way, she was an upper middle class person, went to a private high school. She's doing well in medical sales now, so she's not dumb. But I think this is very powerful. She never asked the question. She just accepted it for what it was. It's what we do in New Orleans. She never asked the question. So I asked the question because I don't know. What is it? So I went out and I do the research, and there was no Google at the time. For most of you, you may or may not know, but what Mardi Gras is, or Carnival in Brazil, etc., is it's the week before Lent. And so at Lent, you have to give shit up.
Yeah.
So it's their idea of party your ass up and do all the shit that you had to give up in Lent before Lent. And that's where it came from. Well, I didn't know that, and she didn't know it. So why am I telling you this story? Too many of you accept what's in front of you and aren't sparked by curiosity or not sparked by the fact that you do not know. My personality is such as if I don't know something, I am uncomfortable, and I am never afraid to ask the question, why, or could you explain, etc. And that is something another book will talk about. In America particularly, people feel asking questions is a sign of weakness. I never fell into that trap. To me, asking questions is how I load my gun.
My other takeaway is to all the women out there who are dating Keenan.
Oh,
to that cohort. And that is a big TAM. To all the women out there, you need to be ready for like Mardi Gras history and like the roots of it and yada, yada, yada. I'm just letting you know, giving you a heads up, the business acumen piece.
They already know. I had a woman today call me pedantic.
To the thousands of women that are out there.
She had to take
I'm going to pull a Keenan. Everybody listen up. Everybody listen up here. To the thousands of women that are out there. Just start Googling random events. You're going to need them.
See, and she missed a good joke too, because a woman literally just called me pedantic today. Do you know what pedantic means?
Are you dating her? Yeah, it means like arrogant, ostentatious.
Not exactly.
It means like you're, I can't put it into words, but you're like forcefully ignorant and you're like completely okay with it. No,
it's just the opposite. It means that you're overly focused on being right or insignificant facts. So in other words, someone said to me, they asked me what my middle name was today. And I said, it's Matthew. And they go, oh, that's pretty saintly. And I said, well, not really. It's more apostolistic. They're apostles, not saints. And I'm like, oh my God, she was right. That's being pedantic. The point she was making was Matthew was sort of a religious name. She called it saintly. I couldn't let it sit. And I was like, Matthew was not a saint. Matthew was an apostle. So I said, oh, it's more apostolistic. That's being pedantic.
Is this one of the girls you're dating?
Don't worry about it,
Is
sweetheart.
there
Don't
trouble
worry
in the
about it.
hood? I'm sorry, Keenan. There's like 14,000 other. So
Wow, what would ever make you say such a thing?
Oh my goodness, the tension.
it means excessively concerned with minor details or rules.
Nitpicky.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I didn't, I thought, maybe she's got a point there.
Oh, hey, but hey,
That would mean Becc is pedantic too, though. Right there with me. So we get along so well. She's right there with me.
Shannon,
Pedantic boat. I should get a big boat someday, a yacht, and put pedantic on the back.
Shannon, you did have a point. You did have a point.
well, hey, with that, we are on to the next segment of this podcast, which is
The challenge.
King cake too. I want a king cake.
well, this is the segment where Keenan and Becc break down a challenging subject within the industry. And today's challenge is how to develop the questions to ask in discovery to be able to diagnose or gap sell. So, Keenan, why don't we start with you today? What are your thoughts on this one?
Good job, Becc. That's a good question. That's a very good question. And I wish there was a way could steer people to this, because I'm going to start with the problem identification chart. So when you're going to do a discovery, in my opinion, you need to know what you're looking for. And I'm not even going to use a doctor metaphor this time. Look at that. I'm going to change up my metaphors. I am going to use a treasure hunter. And when a treasure hunter wants to go find a treasure, they need to have a map that sends them in the right direction. They may not know exactly where it is, but they've got a feel. Okay, so if we're going with the Titanic, where was the Titanic last? How deep could it be? How could tides have changed things, et cetera, et cetera. And so they use that to steer them in the right direction and start testing the waters, or start going out and looking in that particular spot. And if there's nothing in that spot, then they come back and they say, okay, let's take the information given and go back out and try again and come back. The gap selling problem identification chart, is made up of three things, three columns for all intent and purposes. What problems does your product or service solve that your buyers have? What is the impact to the organization should that problem exist? What is the root cause of that problem? What is causing that problem to exist? If you can accurately and effectively identify the 4 or 5 business problems that your product solves, and by the way, 95% of your product only solves 4 or 5, period. Mm-hmm. Then you can assess and write down what the impact is to each one of those problems if they exist in an organization. And then finally, if you can write down what causes that problem to exist, what is going on in an environment that makes that problem exist. If you can get that down on a piece of paper, and then you share that with your reps, and the reps study it, that's all you need to prepare for your discovery, because it's right in front of you and they're connected. And I'll say this last piece and turn over to Becc. In my world, one of the problems we solve, let's say, is low win rates. Okay. I know the impact of that, but I'll go to root causes. What are some of the root causes? Some of the root causes could be a lack of understanding of the environment that someone works in, doing demo before discovery. So let's go with that one. I'm talking to a buyer. I ask them to walk me through their current salesperson's process. Mm-hmm. They say something like, yeah, then we have a button. They ask for a demo. The salesperson shows up and does a demo. I ask 2 or 3 questions on the demo, and then I can say, could you walk me through your win rates? Because I know that doing a demo before discovery affects win rates. So now I know where to take it. It leads me, it guides me. So with that, I'll leave it and pass it over to you, Becc.
The first thing that I would do is understand from metric perspective, how are my buyers metriced? So I think what people have a hard time with are 2 things. Number 1, how do they identify what problems they solve for a buyer? And then number 2, what questions do they ask to be able to diagnose and identify those? So I'm going to start with former. I would understand what metrics are the lagging indicators that your buyers are metriced on. So For instance, Keenan mentioned like low conversion. So you're talking to a VP of sales, you should know that they're typically measured on quota attainment. Now, you need to know a number of things whenever you're in the room. You can't just stop there. What is their current quota set at? How many reps do they have? What is the gap? Like, what's their quota attainment to date? And they're like, oh, well, we just hired a whole bunch of reps a month ago. It's like, okay, what's the ramp quota? How have they been progressing towards it? What have historically reps been doing? So you need to define the size of the problem. Step one of defining the size of the problem is a hypothesis that if I'm talking to a VP of sales, they're likely going to be anchored around solving some type of quota attainment problem, something in relationship to that. So the first thing that I would do is understand what metrics are they typically measured on, what is the gap or the way that they usually want to affect that metric or the goal in relationship to that metric. And then when I'm in the room in discovery, I'm like, okay, I don't need to just define that they want to fix a quota attainment problem. I need to know, and I can't ask them what the problem is. I need to say, what's your quota? Where are you currently at? Historically, when have you been at to date? What's your closed won ratio? What's your ASP? Like, I'm not going to ask them what the condition is. That's the doctor's first job. The second job that I think people struggle with, and if I may, a silver bullet, you need to view it as your job in there is to diagnose as much as you can, to validate or invalidate a self-diagnosis, and to find things that they don't know. So the second step to that, in my opinion, is to know all of the root causes of the typical problem that you solve, and to ask questions to identify whether that root cause that they believe is truly the cause of it. How much is that the cause of it? And are there other root causes that are also the cause of it, causing the problem to exist that you solve for? Are there other root causes that you don't solve for? So I'll give you an example. If I'm coming in and they're like, we have a quota attainment problem. And I'm like, okay, can you find what SQL is? How many SQLs a quota? They're like, SQL is they hit 2 out of 4 bank criteria. Another topic for another time. 10 SQLs a month that they have to book on outbound, and I'm like, how many are they to date? And they're like, at 3. I'm like, ooh, 3. That's, shaping up to be a relatively bad problem. I know in my brain that there's only 8 root causes of not hitting pipeline. How many messages you're sending, the quality of those messages, email deliverability, who are you sending it to, what types of accounts, what time of day, are you multi-threaded? That's really, say 2, that's all. Right? So I'm not asking them, do you if they're like, our quality is bad. And I'm like, can you show me an example of the email? What are your open rates and what are your reply rates? And if they say open rate is whatever, 15%. And I'm like, it might be the quality. I have to see it. But then that flags in my mind. There's also email deliverability, which they might not know. And even if, and I want you to hear me out for 2 seconds, not you, Keenan, but everyone. And then I'm going to pass it back to you. Even if you don't solve for that one, the credibility that you gain by helping your buyer uncover that is worth the same amount in the room, because everyone's trying to build credibility and everyone's trying to build trust with their buyer. So if I diagnose one that I don't even solve for, it actually shows them that I have a cleaner hand, a more experted hand than they ever thought. So worst case scenario, I send them to someone else for that piece, but it earns me the right to ask all of these other questions that now they're more likely to give up because I've already added value, even though it's not a win for me. They don't give a shit because it's a win for them. So they're like, I'm going to keep answering these questions. So that's really the 2 steps I'm thinking of at this point. Keenan, what do you think?
I want to answer a question. So in a minute 30. So Shayon, I hope I got that, Shayon Smith. He says, how do you get this data to best understand their business before the discovery, as most organizations may not offer their information? Does this happen during discovery? What if they're unwilling? Do we look at typical industry issues, problems? Yes, you look at typical. And I asked him what he does. He says, I do marketing consultancy. So you already know what problems you solve. So if you're in marketing, whether it's brand marketing or if it's advertising or it's I don't know what kind of marketing where you have CTAs and shit. I don't know what you call it. But anyways, you got to ask yourself, what is the purpose of marketing, Shayon? And then from that, where do you help them? So if you're helping a marketing organization, I would have to think you'd want to ask questions around return on advertising dollars, return on spend. You might want to ask about lead development. You're like, already, I'm not even a marketer. There's already 3 things that I know that if marketing sucks, they're worried about. So they're spending too much money, and so their return on their ad spend is shit, or their generated leads is shit, or their brand awareness in the market is shit. Like you should know before you get out there and start having those questions prepared. And then as far as what research you do, you just got to research what the fuck they sell. Like if you're selling to, I don't know, if you're selling to Gong, great. Who's Gong's customers? How would you think they would define a lead? How much have they grown recently? How are they using market? And then you ask questions along that. If it's fucking Pepsi, it's an entirely different conversation. Like this is what, Shayon, no disrespect, but it drives me crazy. I don't think people fucking think. You should know. You should literally know. If I'm going to make, oh, he's going to ding me ages ago. If I'm a gas station, or what do you call those people?
Gas station?
Garage, not a gas station, but a service station, right? Where I fix cars, right? I don't even fix cars, people. But you give me a half hour, an hour, and I can already tell you the problems that I solve besides getting that car fixed, right? One problem I solved is getting the car fixed faster and cheaper so you don't have to lose your car for a long time. Another problem I fix is making sure that it doesn't break down again. Another problem I fix is you can get your car in today. You don't have to wait 3 weeks to set an appointment, right? Another problem I fix is that you can trust that when I tell you something is wrong, it's actually what's wrong and I'm not making stuff up. Do you see what I'm saying? Like these are things why people choose a garage. I don't need to ask the customer that. I should already fucking know this. And yeah, I'm fired up right now because I don't know why it is so hard for people. If you don't know what problems you fix for somebody and you don't know why they're suffering from them or they should be suffering them, you should stop selling. Just get the fuck out.
Something I was going to suggest for this person. What was their name? Sorry.
Shayon.
Okay. Click-through rate. Impression rate.
Yeah.
Like are all statistics you should know, but here's the main thing. In the example of buyer's metrics for Keenan, for instance, if I'm talking to a marketer, then I know that their metric is usually MQL, demo request, and influence pipeline. So I'm like, what are your MQLs you have to hit? You know, what's the definition of an MQL? What's the gap to date, et cetera, blah, blah. If I'm talking to Keenan, do you give a shit about MQLs?
No.
I'm going to guess you give a shit about revenue.
Opportunities created.
Yeah, revenue.
Leads.
Ultimately, though.
Yeah. Ultimately, I care about leads as a CEO because it's a leading indicator. So and it's a marketing
note. Your final metric as a CEO is going to be, I'm going to guess, revenue and growth, right?
Oh, okay. As a CEO, yes. And this is a good conversation, though, Becc. But if I'm talking to a marketer, I don't want to be that high because it doesn't.
Right.
Okay, go.
I'm saying for you though. So I'm like, for a marketer, it's lead, MQL, demo requests, influence pipeline. That's the direction I'm going with a marketer. But if I'm transitioning to you, not like CEO, but like Keenan, do you care about an MQL?
Probably. No, I do care about a lead.
Yeah. Okay. You care about a lead and opportunity. So your ending lagging indicator is going to be revenue and growth. So you're going to care about the quality of that lead, and you're going to measure that by the conversion of that lead.
Yes.
And so we're going to have to back our way into the math. You see what I'm saying? And so a root cause for someone can be the final lagging indicator for another, depending on their role.
Yes.
Like lagging indicator for an SDR leader is booked meeting that's an SQL. A VP of sales sees that as a root cause of its pipeline because that's not their lagging indicator. So I would just anchor myself in their world. One of the things that pisses Keenan off into oblivion is he's like, I don't care about impression rate. I don't care about click-through rate. I care about book sales. I care about leads, opportunity, and close one business from my marketing efforts from an ROI perspective as a CEO. So it's like you need to shed your perspective and enter your head of like, if I'm in Keenan's brain and I got to keep track of 18,000 women and also grow my business from a revenue perspective, how am I going to do that through my marketing efforts? And how am I going to view that when I have so little time from all the dates? So you have to enter yourself into Keenan's brain and to Keenan's, economy and know what he's after and be able to quickly talk about that on a dime and define it for him.
Well,
Then, one last thing.
yes. Well, with that, we're on to the last segment of this podcast, which is...
Oh, listen, just one more thing.
This is the segment where Keenan and Becc give us their closing thoughts. So, Keenan, let's start off with you. What is your just one more thing?
Yeah, I had a just one thing, but I am completely going to pivot. And so my pivot is this. I am going to wait to see how many women write in or leave a comment about how disrespectful, stay with me here, Becc was and how sexist Becc was about calling me basically a whore and how many men I was, and bringing up my dating practices, blah, blah. Because I can tell you how many it's going to be and how many it should be. Zero. It's going to be zero, and I don't care that it's zero because it should be zero because it's all in fun and jest. But had I flipped this fucking script and I did that to Becc, I would have been torn to shreds by women all over the internet for me being disrespectful about Beck's dating practices and implying she's with a lot of different men and how that it's about her sexuality, etc. So my last thing is we need to take a good hard look at how much pressure and how we drive our wokeness. And by the way, I am a liberal and I am a feminist, and I believe that women and gays and blacks and minorities all need equal opportunity. And I'm full on. I'm in your camp. I'm an ally. But I don't go as far as we go. And I thought this is a perfect example. Not a single woman listening to this even thought for a second it was inappropriate. But had I done it to Becc, I'd be on the hot seat right now. So it's time we all wake up and take a good hard look at how we break this stuff down and the biases we bring to the table and the inconsistencies and hypocrisies about where men sit and women sit. There you have it. One last thing.
Hey, we're canceling each other on this podcast.
I do.
Becc, what is your one more thing?
Keenan has asked some relative questions today, to be fair to Becc on this podcast. Point being, yeah, another topic for another time, but the whole Lizzo thing is breaking my heart. Absolutely breaking my heart.
Oh.
She is getting canceled very quickly, and I'm like,
wait, what? The loser thing? What?
Lizzo.
She's getting canceled.
Oh, I'm not paying attention to that.
I have some thoughts on she's getting canceled relatively quickly.
What'd she do?
There's some lawsuits against her for sexual harassment charges and for basically letting go dancers for being overweight when she's body positivity. That's what she sings about, a lot. What makes me a little uncomfortable is how quickly people are going from Liz is the best to let's just throw her away. Off of, it's just interesting. Anywho, I think she's a great writer, but my one last thing. So this is going to be, I will keep it to a minute and a half. There is a ballet creator named George Balanchine. He's known as the father of American ballet. And essentially Balanchine Ballet is known for two things. Number one, the prestige that it is to dance a George Balanchine ballet. Because number two, he's known for minimal props, minimal structure, but basically just a wireframe. And so it's a privilege for the dancers to be able to create that world underneath, a Balanchine infrastructure because it's minimal direction, but there's still the wireframe. All I mean that to say is when we're talking about AI or we're talking about ChatGPT or we're talking about a trainer coming in or we're talking about any of this or we're talking about, any kind of structure there is to support, I think people should embrace that. And if you were to shut your eyes take a step back, realize that those things are meant to support you. They're not meant to replace you. You still have a place. And usually the reason that you're fighting back, at least in my past when I have been, is because of ego. That I'm like, I don't need you. I don't want you because I want to feel like I have a place. So you can't just go wild, wild west without structure. but you can't just go structure all the time. So I would embrace the tools around me and say like, okay, some of this stuff is designed to help me. So I'm going to figure out what that is, and I'm going to leave the rest, but I'm going to marry myself to structure as much as possible and put my creativity, etc., into that to clean me up and help me be more effective. That's it. My one last thing was not nearly as spicy.
Well, that's our podcast.
I had Darlene Dominguez go goodbye, bye, bye. Couldn't tell if she was upset about my rant or just saying goodbye. Or...
It's Lizzo. I think it's a Lizzo lyric.
Oh, is that
I mean, it's heartbreaking. Lizzo is a wonderful musician. I thought she got robbed.
Isn't she the one who changed a lyric too? She didn't realize she had said a lyric that wasn't appropriate. She went in.
Yeah,
and
it was something around spaz. Yeah. But to her, About Damn Time, Girls. I mean, she just hit after hit after hit that I hear remnants for the first time of Michael Jackson that I'm like, are palatable and are really, really good. She is a hell of a writer. And so I'm just a little bit gutted to see, she did what she did, but to see people just, throw her away all of a sudden is just heartbreaking.
We're too soft. And that's coming. Like, I feel confident in the world in my position is I am about as liberal as they come, but I'm not a fool. Mm-hmm. And we're getting too soft, and we got to get more of a meritocracy. Can you imagine someday that someone gets cut from a football team because he's too overweight? Oh, how dare you cut someone from a football team? Sports is really one of the few places that the meritocracy matters, right? And they're like, oh, you're too slow. Oh, we're being mean against slow people. No, I need this trait to perform this thing. It's so cut and dry. We do it. But now there's other areas in business where we determine that something maybe not be good for business, but we're not okay with that. You know what I'm saying? We're not okay with that. And now you basically, everything has to go and everybody has to be represented. Well, that person doesn't represent my business best for whatever particular reason. And all people like that undermine my business. Why do I have to placate to them? It makes zero sense to me. Sorry.
No, Keenan, this topic, if you knew some emails that I get and comments that are made, you'd just be astounded.
No, I wouldn't.
The amount of eggshells and, your hair's too long or it's too short, blah, blah, blah. Anywho. Okay, you got to go.
My next meeting's starting. Sorry, everybody. Okay, everybody.
Peace.
Thank you for listening. This was Sales Top to Bottom. I'm your host, Keenan.
And I'm Becc. A bientôt. See you next week.
Until next time. Later, y'all.
Bye.
Peace.